Hello, incredible story enthusiasts. Welcome to Story Room Lab. Before we delve into the story, take a second to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss one of our dramatic episodes. Now, tell me in the comments below. Where are you watching this story unfold from? I love seeing our community grow across the globe. Now let's delve into the story. The pavement of the financial district on a July afternoon felt less like concrete and more like a griddle set to high. The heat radiated up through the thin soles of my sneakers, mixing with the relentless reflected glare from the glass towers that scraped the sky. I stood near the corner of Madison and 52nd, the spot I'd claimed for the summer, selling chilled water and sodas from a beat-up cooler shielded by a cheap, sun-faded umbrella. This was my office. The skyscrapers were the silent, beautiful villains of my immediate future. Every bottle sold was a direct deposit into the ever-hungry account of my university tuition. My name is Elara, and I was exactly 47 bottles shy of the payment deadline for my final semester of nursing school. That number, 47, pulsed behind my eyes with the ferocity of a migraine. There was no room for distraction, no energy for self-pity, and certainly no time for noticing the meticulously tailored suits and designer shoes that hurried past my small, temporary business venture. These people, the residents of the Heights, moved at a different speed, driven by transactions I couldn't comprehend and deadlines I couldn't afford to miss. I'd learned the rhythm of this corner well. The frantic rush at lunchtime, the desperate thirst of the mid-afternoon stragglers, and the slow, weary exodus of the elite at 5. It was during the lull, around 3:30 p.m., that he arrived. The moment he stepped out of the tinted black sedan that pulled up precisely at the curb, a car so silent and smooth it seemed to defy physics, the air changed. It wasn't just the appearance of a man of immense power. It was the way the light seemed to sharpen around him. He was tall, intimidatingly so, wearing a charcoal suit that looked less like fabric and more like armor forged from shadow. His dark hair was impeccably groomed, and his presence carried the weight of decisive authority. You didn't just notice him. You felt the immediate shift in the gravitational pull of the street. I registered his approach purely in professional terms, a likely high-margin sale, possibly needing a cold brew coffee instead of water. I braced my most practiced polite smile, the one that said, "I am a vendor, and I am efficient." He stopped directly in front of my cooler. His bodyguard, a massive silent man in an ill-fitting black jacket, remained 5 feet behind him, scanning the street. The CEO, I instantly categorized him as such, because only a CEO could walk with that level of serene, unburdened power, didn't speak right away. He looked at the selection, the rows of plastic bottles sweating slightly under the umbrella, but his gaze settled on me. And that was when the world, which had been spinning at a frantic, noisy pace, decelerated into a painful, crystalline silence. His eyes were an intense, startling gray, the color of a winter sky just before a snowstorm. They were piercing, intelligent, and held an unnerving depth of focus. They didn't just glance over me, the weary girl in the college sweatshirt and slightly stained apron. They saw me. They saw the relentless heat, the desperation hidden behind the practiced smile, and perhaps, the fierce, burning ambition for a better future that drove me to stand there hour after hour. I felt a rush of heat that had nothing to do with the sun. It was the sudden, shocking jolt of being truly witnessed by a person who was supposed to be completely blind to my existence. In his world I was the backdrop, the scenery. Yet, he was looking at me with an intensity that felt like an inquiry. I broke the silence first, forcing my voice to remain cheerful and brisk. "Water, sir? Extra chilled. Please," he responded. His voice was deep, resonant, and controlled, betraying only a faint, intriguing roughness. I reached into the cooler, the shock of the ice-cold water momentarily grounding me. As I handed him the bottle, our fingers brushed, a momentary accidental contact that sparked through my hand. He didn't flinch, but his gaze intensified, lingering on my hand for a fraction of a second before meeting my eyes again. "How much?" he asked, pulling a sleek, expensive leather wallet from his jacket. $2, I replied, holding out my hand for the cash. He didn't pull out 2 singles. He handed me a crisp $100 bill. "I don't have change for that, sir," I stated, my professional veneer instantly returning. Pride dictated that I didn't want his charity, only his patronage. "Keep it," he said, the corner of his mouth lifting barely a millimeter, a motion that felt less like a smile and more like the twitch of a predatory animal. "No, thank you," I insisted, maintaining eye contact despite the sudden nervousness that made my palms damp. I appreciate the gesture, but I need the revenue from the sale, not a tip. I'll get change. He paused, the 100 still extended between us. His gray eyes studied my face, and I knew he was assessing my refusal, calculating my pride, and perhaps, confirming the strength of the drive he saw moments earlier. Most people would have snatched the 100 and muttered thanks. I was refusing it, not because it was too much, but because accepting it would negate the purpose of my labor. Finally, slowly, he returned the 100 to his wallet and pulled out a crisp $2 then. I made the change meticulously, handing him back the 3 singles. Thank you, sir. Stay cool. He took the bottle, but instead of walking away, he took a slow sip, his eyes still fixed on mine over the rim of the plastic bottle. He was delaying his departure, conducting a silent, unnerving observation. You're out here every day? He asked, his tone casual, yet laced with an interest that felt far from it. Every day until the deadline, I confirmed, stacking a few empty cans back into the cooler, deliberately avoiding a direct confrontation with his gaze. Tuition doesn't pay itself. He didn't ask which school or what my major was, details that would invite conversation. He simply nodded, absorbing the information. He looked at the massive glass tower behind him, a building that undoubtedly housed his entire universe, and then back at my small, determined operation. A necessary transaction, he murmured, perhaps more to himself than to me. He finally turned, walking away with that same unhurried, dominant stride, leaving a wake of shimmering heat and a profound, unsettling disturbance in my careful routine. I watched him get back into the black sedan, which glided away seamlessly, rejoining the indifferent flow of traffic. I sank onto the small folding stool, clutching the $3 bills, the tangible fruits of my labor. I tried to shake off the encounter, to categorize it as just another weird interaction with a rich eccentric. But the intensity of his gaze, the brief electric contact, and his curious pause lingered like a persistent hum. That man, that CEO, hadn't just bought water. He had seen a flash of something in my fierce working ambition that had stopped him, mid-stride, in his powerful universe. I dismissed it quickly. To buy my gratitude. He was from the heights. I retorted. I was on the pavement. Throwing the change onto the POS system counter. He would forget the face selling water before his car reached the next block. I had 46 bottles left to sell. He placed the water bottle down on the counter and looked directly into my eyes. Not on the impossible fantasy of a losing its professional enchantment. Elara, the incident with the CEO, I am not trying to buy your gratitude. Whose name I still didn't know. I am trying to buy your time. Frustrated my analytical mind and reinforced his status as an untouchable enigma. Of knowing that when I come here, remain an isolated incident, safe, if anything, and not preoccupied with manual labor that can be automated. Strange, unsettling drama starring our conversations, the exhausted and I am willing to invest in the circumstances that allow them to occur. I only observe from the pavement. Think of it as a private subscription to your corner. The first hint of his return came the very next day. His honesty was disarming. I arrived at my corner, cooler dragging, sweat already beating on my forehead. He was confessing an intensely possessive interest that manifested as financial optimization. Had been erected on the building facade directly above my usual spot. But his form of courtship was calculated, neutral canvas, controlled patronage, unobtrusive, a clear reflection but undeniably of his CEO providing shade and protection from the elements. More remarkably, a sleek industrial-grade mini refrigerator was plugged into a nearby, discreet outdoor outlet, replacing my battered cooler. I stared at the setup, dumbfounded. The refrigerator was stocked, not with the cheap bulk water I usually bought, but with high-end, imported sparkling waters and artisan cold brews. There was a small sealed note taped to the side. The heat index reached 105 degrees yesterday. Efficient operations require appropriate infrastructure. Use the resources provided. The note was unsigned, but the tone, the sterile impersonal language of optimization and efficiency, screamed CEO. He hadn't sent a messenger or approached me. He had simply implemented an expensive logistical upgrade to my small business, treating my street corner operation like a problematic segment of his sprawling conglomerate that needed immediate capital injection. My initial reaction was a fierce mix of offense and paralyzing gratitude. Offense, because it felt like a condescending gesture that undermined the dignity of my struggle. Gratitude, because the refrigerator meant zero ice cost and perfectly chilled inventory, drastically reducing my operating expenses. I felt the sharp prick of my pride, but the looming deadline of my tuition payment was a far more powerful motivator. I used the resources. He appeared again 3 days later, at the exact same time, 3:30 p.m. He stepped out of the black sedan, looking even more formidable than before. His gray eyes instantly finding me under the new awning. The inventory is superior, I stated, handing him a bottle of the imported sparkling water he seemed to prefer. But I still only charged $2. He accepted the bottle, handing me a $10 bill. I am aware of your pricing model, Elara, he replied, using my name for the first time. A name he must have found either on the handwritten sign taped to my cooler yesterday or extracted from some database. It felt less like an address and more like a declaration of ownership. The quality of the product justifies the cost of the infrastructure. The quality of the product is my hard work, sir. And it still costs $2, I insisted, handing him back an $8 change. And the infrastructure was unnecessary. He smiled this time, a genuine fleeting warmth that transformed his severe features into something truly arresting. My name is Alexander Thorne. And I disagree. Efficiency is never unnecessary. He stayed for a full 5 minutes, not discussing business or finance, but simply observing me. He asked about the traffic patterns, the peak sales times, and the ratio of water to coffee sales. He was treating my little stand like a field study, analyzing my strategy with laser focus. When he finally left, he didn't offer money or gifts, just a simple, "See you next week, Elara." His return had become an unspoken, scheduled event. Every few days, Alexander Thorne would appear, always arriving in the sleek black car, always demanding only the $2 water, and always staying to ask questions that were simultaneously invasive and completely professional. He never asked about my personal life, not my major, my dreams, or my family. Only the mechanics of my grind. Why the shift to cold brew inventory, Elara? Was the margin insufficient on simple water? You seem to experience a 15% drop in volume between 4 p.m. and 4:30 p.m. Have you calculated the ROI on implementing a loyalty program during that slack period? I found myself preparing for his visits, not emotionally, but analytically. I started tracking my sales data meticulously, compiling charts and calculating precise margins, desperate to prove to the silent, powerful auditor that my operation was logically sound, deserving of respect, and not just a pitiful plea for help. I was selling water, but I was defending my intelligence to the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation. This calculated patronage escalated in strange, unsettling ways. One morning, I found a heavy black industrial fan humming quietly beside the refrigerator, providing a necessary powerful breeze against the relentless heat. The next day, a small, sleek POS system, point of sale, had replaced my old tin can for cash, complete with a tiny solar panel and a note simply reading, "Optimized data capture." I was furious, proud, and indebted all at once. My expenses had plummeted, my sales were easier to manage, and the tuition deadline was suddenly achievable. But every amenity felt like a chain, a reminder that I was now an employee, albeit an incredibly well-funded one, in Alexander Thorne's private universe. The most jarring incident occurred when my old worn sweatshirt, a Lucky Charm I wore every day, ripped badly. The following morning, tucked discreetly under the awning, was a garment bag containing a small stack of high-quality, breathable athletic shirts in neutral colors. No note, just 3 shirts in my size. He had noticed my worn clothing and silently upgraded my uniform. I finally confronted him during his next visit, my voice tight with resentment. "Mr. Thorne, you need to stop this. You are changing the entire structure of my work." He took his sip of water, his gray eyes completely placid. "I am improving efficiency and mitigating operational risk. Your goal is tuition. My goal is successful execution. You were inefficiently deployed. And you are attempting to buy my gratitude," I retorted, throwing the change onto the POS system counter. "I don't need your charity. I need to earn this myself." He placed the water bottle down on the counter and looked directly into my eyes, his expression losing its professional detachment. "Elara, I am not trying to buy your gratitude. I am trying to buy your time. I am a busy man. I require the satisfaction of knowing that when I come here, you are here, safe, and not preoccupied with manual labor that can be automated. I enjoy our conversations, and I am willing to invest in the circumstances that allow them to occur. Think of it as a private subscription to your corner." His honesty was disarming. He was not confessing affection. He was confessing an intensely possessive interest that manifested as financial optimization. He was enchanted, yes, but his form of courtship was calculated, controlled patronage, a clear reflection of his CEO mindset. I realized then that this was the price of his love, I had to accept his control, his resources, and the blurring of the lines between patronage and affection. I was standing under his awning, selling his inventory, using his equipment, yet fiercely determined to maintain the dignity of my $2 transaction. The tuition deadline loomed closer, and I was caught between my intense pride and the overwhelming, calculated force of Alexander Thorne's will. The looming tuition deadline was not just a date on a calendar. It was a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I had worked every hour the sun allowed, and thanks to the sudden lavish upgrades provided by Alexander Thorne, my margins had swelled miraculously. The sleek new POS system and the industrial mini-fridge, his silent extensions of capital, had effectively cut my time to goal in half. I knew, with a certainty that both fueled my pride and gnawed at my conscience, that without his calculated interference, I would still be weeks away from my target. The day I reached the final number, the precise amount needed for the last tuition installment, was August 18th, a sweltering Thursday. I had sold 47 bottles by 2 p.m., hitting the exact dollar amount I needed. I locked the cash box, pulled the plug on the refrigerator, and started breaking down my operation with a mixture of profound relief and sharp, unexpected melancholy. I was rolling up the new awning, the one he'd provided, when the black sedan pulled up, precisely on schedule. Alexander stepped out. He was holding a file, not water, and his expression was focused, betraying none of his usual observational detachment. He stopped, noticing the unplugged fridge and the coiled extension cord. "Elara," he stated, his gray eyes piercing the afternoon glare. "You are closing early." "Yes, Mr. Thorne," I replied, my voice steady, my spine straight despite the exhaustion. "I made my quota. I have the tuition payment." I stood there, surrounded by the physical evidence of my summer's labor. The cooler, the folding stool, the stack of perfectly laundered athletic shirts he had provided. It was a victory, but a complicated one, defined by his shadow. He walked over and picked up the coiled extension cord, his touch brief and careful. "Congratulations. That is a demonstration of superior execution. Now, the transaction is complete. The contract is fulfilled." "The transaction was $2 for water," I corrected gently, though my heart was hammering. "My personal contract with myself is fulfilled. Thank you for the logistical support, Mr. Thorne, but this is all going back to where it belongs." I reached for the sleek POS machine, intending to place it in the box for return. He caught my wrist, his grip firm but not painful, the first time he had physically restrained me. "Stop," he commanded, his voice low. "The infrastructure is irrelevant. It was a tool to ensure our meeting. It remains here. And the awning is part of the lease agreement for the commercial space above you, which I secured 3 weeks ago. It isn't going anywhere." My jaw dropped. "A lease agreement? You leased the commercial space above a street corner just to put up an awning for me? And for our subscription?" "Of course," he said, releasing my wrist but not his gaze. "A successful transaction requires control over the variables. The weather and your need for income were variables. I neutralized them. Now that the financial variable is gone, we can move to the next stage of the negotiation." He pulled a key card from his jacket and handed it to me. "I don't need water anymore, Elara. I need an appointment. I need to talk to the woman who refused $100 because she knew the exact value of her labor. I want to talk to the nursing student with the ambition of a CEO." He had finally crossed the invisible line from calculated patronage to personal pursuit. "I don't know who that is," I stammered, overwhelmed by the sudden intensity of his focus and the revelation of his extraordinary, elaborate lengths to maintain contact. "I do," he insisted, his voice softening just enough to convey genuine sincerity beneath the command. "You are the only person who can stop me mid-stride. I see endless ambition in you, Elara. Not for money but for purpose. That is a quality I find necessary." He then did something truly shocking. He reached into the refrigerator, pulled out a bottle of water, opened it, and poured the entire contents onto the pavement. "There. The transaction is severed," he stated, the water quickly dissolving into the heat. "Now, I am simply a man, Alexander, asking a woman, Elara, for a meal. Not a business lunch. A date. Tomorrow night. I need to know the price of your time when it is no longer measured in tuition payments." I looked at the keycard, the physical evidence of the absurd lengths he had gone to, and I laughed, a genuine surprised burst of sound that echoed between the tall buildings. He didn't just buy my time. He bought the entire ecosystem around my time. You are completely unbelievable, Mr. Thorne, I managed to say, shaking my head. Alexander, he corrected, his lips curving into a much warmer, more human smile. And yes, I am. Will you meet me? I looked at the financial district, at the sheer glass face of his world, and I realized I wasn't scared of the height anymore. I had met the deadline, secured my future, and proved my worth. I no longer needed his money. I could only accept his interest. Yes, Alexander, I agreed, finally accepting the terms of the next negotiation. But you leave the private jet at home. And you let me pick the restaurant. I want to be introduced to the man, not the CEO. His eyes, that intense striking gray, flashed with a mixture of surprise and delight. He had finally encountered a variable he couldn't control with capital. Done, he agreed, his voice rough with anticipation. I look forward to discussing efficiency with you. I watched him walk away for the last time as a customer. The corner, now quiet and shaded by the awning, felt like a neutral zone, the place where two vastly different worlds had collided and, against all odds, found a bridge built on sheer stubborn will. The price of my tuition had been the summer's grind. The price of Alexander's love was the dismantling of his own control. The transaction was over. The romance was just beginning. My date with Alexander was, by necessity, a study in contrasts. To honor my demand to meet the man, not the CEO, I chose a tiny, fiercely authentic Ethiopian restaurant nestled in a neighborhood miles away from his glass towers. The place was loud, warm, and smelled deliciously of spiced butter and coffee. The complete antithesis of the sterile, hushed environments he was accustomed to. When he arrived, I felt the familiar jolt of his presence, but this time, it was softened. He wasn't wearing the armor of his charcoal suit. He wore a simple, dark cashmere sweater and tailored trousers. He looked handsome, yes, but more importantly, he looked approachable, though he still carried the quiet authority of a man used to being obeyed. This is unfamiliar infrastructure, he observed, his gray eyes sweeping over the vibrant, crowded room before settling on me. It's called atmosphere, I smiled, leading him to a small, slightly rickety table. It's what happens when the design budget is spent on ingredients, not marble. The date was captivating, intense, and utterly disorienting. Alexander wasn't awkward. He was simply unpracticed in the art of easy, uncalculated conversation. He approached the date as he would a market analysis. He asked piercing questions about my nursing studies, my motivation for choosing a challenging corner location, and how I managed inventory shrink, waste, during peak summer hours. He analyzed my ambition, treating my determination to finish school as the most attractive feature of my life. I in turn challenged his world. What is the true ROI on perfection, Alexander? You live in a state of absolute control. What happens when the variables are human? What do you do when something is simply beautiful, not efficient? He seemed genuinely thrown by the question. Beauty is often found in symmetry and order, Elara. Disruption is inefficient. Disruption is how new art is made, I countered. And sometimes how new love is found. As the evening deepened, the layers of the CEO slowly peeled away, revealing the deeply private, driven man beneath. He told me about his childhood, not one of inherited wealth, but a fiercely competitive, self-made ascent driven by a fear of failure. He explained that his need for control wasn't about power over others, but about maintaining the stability he had lacked growing up. He confessed that watching me work, relentless and proud on the street corner, had captivated him because I represented the purest form of efficiency. Achieving the maximum result with minimum resources. You weren't selling water, Elara, he admitted, swirling the dark Ethiopian coffee in his cup. You were executing a flawless personal mission, indifferent to my status. You saw me as a $2 transaction, and that refusal of my power was the most powerful thing I've encountered in years. The next few weeks became a whirlwind of secret dates, bridging the impossible gap between our realities. We avoided his world entirely. We hiked trails in upstate New York, far from the skyscrapers. We visited small, dusty bookstores, a nod to my literary background. And we even spent an afternoon volunteering at a free clinic, where Alexander was forced to confront chaos, uncertainty, and the profound inefficiency of human suffering, a process that humbled and softened him visibly. But the complexity of his life was an unavoidable gravity. He couldn't just turn off the CEO. He would receive urgent calls during dinner, his face instantly hardening into the unapproachable mask of power. I would find myself waiting, watching the change, aware that no matter how much we laughed at a small cafe, his primary devotion was to the empire he managed. The true test of our dynamic came when the news of our unlikely relationship inevitably leaked. A prominent society column ran a photo of us, taken discreetly while we were leaving the small restaurant, with the headline, "Billionaire Bachelor Trades Boardroom for Backstreets, the CEO and the cold brew cart." The fallout was immediate and venomous. His board expressed grave concerns about the stability of his personal life affecting the company image. His social circle was openly condescending, viewing me as a frivolous, temporary distraction. One particularly nasty article referred to me as the CEO's charity project, implying that my sudden appearance in his life was a calculated move on my part to secure a permanent financial upgrade. Alexander was furious, but not at me. He was angry at the violation of his privacy and the blatant classism aimed at me. "This is unacceptable," he declared, pacing his lavish penthouse living room, a space I now visited but still felt alien in. "They are attempting to undermine you because they can't control you. I will issue a statement immediately." "Stop," I insisted, stepping into his path. "You are not going to fight this with a press release, Alexander. That only reinforces the narrative that I'm your subordinate, your cause, requiring your protection. I am an independent agent." I earned my way out of that corner. I looked around the intimidating, art-filled room. "They are judging me by your currency. I need to demonstrate my value in my currency: intelligence, ambition, and career merit." I had a major exam coming up, the final hurdle before graduation. I also had a tentative job offer at a prestigious city hospital. "I need you to give me space," I told him, placing my hands on his chest, feeling the steady, powerful beat of his heart. "Not because I am running, but because I am proving my worth. Focus on your board. I will focus on my license. When I walk into that hospital job, I want the name Elara to carry its own weight, not be defined by the man who bought the awning." Alexander understood the move perfectly. It was a strategic retreat, a necessary validation of my independent power. He looked at me, a mixture of pride and frustration in his eyes. "You are forcing me to accept the variables again," he said, shaking his head. "I am forcing you to respect my worth," I corrected. "I traded the corner for the career. I didn't trade my independence for your protection. Now, let's both go prove the value of our respective missions." He conceded, recognizing the unyielding determination that first drew him to me on that scorching corner. The CEO was reluctantly forced to respect the terms of the strong, independent woman he loved. I left the gilded penthouse, walking back toward my modest student apartment, carrying not his diamond necklace, but the profound hard-won certainty that I was capable of navigating both his world and mine, entirely on my own terms. The weeks leading up to my final exam and the start of my nursing career were the quietest, most intensely focused period of my relationship with Alexander. He respected my boundary, retreating entirely from my sphere to allow me the space to succeed purely on my own merit. Our communication was limited to brief, encouraging messages that felt like logistical check-ins, professional in their brevity yet charged with shared commitment. He understood that my success was the only currency that would truly validate our future. I passed my final board exams with flying colors and accepted the position at the city hospital, a demanding role in the emergency department. When I finally called Alexander with the news, the quiet pride in his voice was more rewarding than any lavish celebration. "Elara, I am immensely proud of you," he said simply. "You executed your mission flawlessly. The transaction is complete." "The transaction is complete," I confirmed, "and the worth of the investment has been proven." Our lives began to merge, no longer defined by the corner, but by the conscious decision to build a shared future that respected both the boardroom and the bedside. I moved out of my student apartment, but I refused to move into his penthouse immediately. Instead, we found a beautiful mid-sized apartment that sat exactly halfway between the hospital where I worked and the tower where he ruled, a physical manifestation of our commitment to balance. The final, definitive moment came at the annual Thorne Group Gala. This was the pinnacle of Alexander's world, an event where his entire social and corporate network gathered, and where I knew the lingering doubts about the water girl would be at their peak. Alexander insisted I attend, but not as his +1, as an individual worthy of respect. I walked into the glittering ballroom wearing a stunning gown, not chosen by him, but chosen for the confidence it gave me. I carried myself with the quiet authority I had earned on the street corner, and honed in the competitive environment of my hospital. The whispers began instantly. There she is. The one who sold water. The charity project. Alexander met me by the entrance, his gray eyes radiating proprietary pride, but he didn't shield me. He led me straight into the most powerful cluster of people. His board members, his senior executives, and the very socialites who had derided me months earlier. The most challenging encounter was with Julian Vance, a long-standing board member who had been the most vocal critic of our relationship. "Elara," Vance greeted me with a condescending smile. "It's lovely to see you cleaned up. Alexander assures us that your background is now firmly behind you." The implication was clear. I was his trophy, polished and controlled. I didn't flinch. I looked directly at Vance, who was clutching a glass of champagne. "It's good to see you too, Mr. Vance. And yes, my background is firmly behind me. I finished my degree on time and passed my boards with honors. I now manage 2 trauma bays on the busiest floor of the city's hospital." I shifted my focus to the expensive champagne glass in his hand. "Speaking of background, I spent a summer selling water on the hottest corner in this city. I can tell you the precise R value of that glass and the margin of error for liquid thermal stability in this room. I understand operational efficiency and human desperation better than anyone here." I met Vance's stunned gaze. "My value is not defined by the man who pays my bills, Mr. Vance. My value is defined by my demonstrated execution under extreme pressure. Alexander is not my protector. He is my partner. And I guarantee I am a more valuable asset to him, in life and in strategy, than anyone else here." The silence in the cluster was absolute. Alexander, who had stood back, allowing me to fight my own battle, stepped forward, placing his hand gently on the small of my back, a gesture of respect, not possession. "Elara is correct," Alexander affirmed, his voice resonating with authority. "She achieved her goal while enduring professional sabotage and unwarranted social scrutiny. She is the epitome of high-value, high-return investment. Gentlemen, I recommend you treat her as such." That night, the conversation around us changed. The envy and condescension shifted to grudging respect. I was no longer the water girl. I was Elara, the woman who had conquered both the street corner and the boardroom with her fierce integrity. Later, back in our shared apartment, the compromise we had built, I found Alexander waiting by the window, the city lights stretching out below us. "You were magnificent," he murmured, pulling me into his arms. "I didn't need your money or your protection," I said, looking up at him. "I just needed your respect. And the resources to fight my own fight." He reached out and produced a small velvet box. Inside, resting on the cushion, was not a diamond ring, but a custom-made, delicate silver pin shaped like an outstretched hand holding a single perfectly clear drop of water. "It's not a commitment of capital," Alexander explained, his voice thick with emotion. "It's a symbol. It represents the value of the woman who would not take the $100, who taught the CEO that true worth is measured in labor, pride, and purpose. It is the symbol of the moment I realized I couldn't live without you." I took the pin, the cool silver a tangible reminder of the heat, the struggle, and the unexpected kindness that had changed my life. I pinned it carefully to my dress. "I love you, Alexander," I whispered, realizing that the price of our love had been paid not in dollars, but in the mutual surrender of control and the honest recognition of each other's inherent worth. Our life together was built on that foundation. I learned to navigate his world of power without sacrificing my compassion, and he learned to embrace the beautiful inefficiency of a life governed by love, not just logistics. The CEO had been enchanted by a girl selling water, but he stayed for the powerful, compassionate woman who forced him to value the worth of her soul over the weight of his fortune.